So I know Kevin through the work we do in our weekly men's circle. Now it's twice a week. We're coming together, and Kevin is the organizer of this gold mining group that has really impacted me and helped me grow over the last 2 years. And I shared a little bit about this in my conversation with Andy Wick a few weeks ago. And I'm excited to come back around and explore the origins of Gold Mining Circle and how Kevin came into this work. So yeah, maybe we could start from the beginning with you, Kevin, with men's work, how you got started with Mankind Project and doing men's work in general.
Well, it's been a long-term interest of mine because I've been looking for an opportunity to be in a men's group for quite a while. And I didn't find anything that really hit. And then a friend of mine at the beginning of 2004 invited me to join a group that he was forming locally that was part of this larger organization. It was called Mankind Project. I said, okay, so we'll go check that out. And it ended up being something that was really impactful. We started with a small group here in San Luis Obispo that was part of this larger organization. We had support from some groups in Santa Barbara, and it's grown over time to be 9 different groups here in San Luis Obispo area of various sorts, and we've had just a wonderful community that's developed out of it of men becoming better men for themselves and families and community and their work, and really has been life-altering in the kinds of things that it's done. And now, especially after COVID, with taking a lot of things online, like the gold mining work that we're talking about, it's been an opportunity to take it everywhere. And so when you and I have been in group together, sometimes you've been calling in from Costa Rica, or, guys calling in from the East Coast all the time. And we have requests from other guys, to do this work internationally. So I've really, really enjoyed the opportunity to be able to expand what we're doing.
You said you were looking for a men's group even back in 2004. What was your experience looking for the men's group? What were the motivations when you come into men's work? What motivated you to get started doing this?
There's a sense of community that I was looking for. There was a sense of comradeship. As time goes on, it was more important for me to be really conscious of what I was doing as, service in my life, in community, and the men's group provided a really good way to focus that.
Let's catch people up to who maybe we've been saying men's work. When we say men's work, what we're meaning by that, what this looks like practically in a circle, just for people who are new to this. Like, how do you explain when people haven't heard about a men's circle or men's work? How do you explain that to someone new to this?
Yeah, that's a great point. So if you let's look at it topically. So one of the areas that we focused on in the gold mining circle here recently was about active listening. So active listening being, let me actually pay attention to what you're saying and be able to echo it back without judgment. Now, in my experience, that is an extremely rare characteristic that you find out in the world. Most of the time there's so much preoccupation with what's going on in somebody's own mind that there really isn't any active listening going on. But the ability to be able to listen and to empathize and to be able to connect back with someone is extremely valuable. So those are skills that we work on in the men's group, along with a whole variety of skill sets around emotional literacy, around communication, just like we're talking about, around working through issues in our lives, past traumas, healing work of numerous varieties. It all gets brought into the men's work.
And this work, we do it in the circle in different phases and there's a lot of steps we take to do this in terms of conversation, one-on-one, different types of ways this work can happen. Do you feel like, I guess I'll say, I felt like that having a community around doing this work, a community around developing these skills has been essential for me. So I think personally coming into this, I knew I wanted some of those stronger abilities of more emotional intelligence, more active listening, more camaraderie, things you described. And then I found that I can grow this in community. And so some of the skills Kevin's talking about, we'll often start with a sensei piece in our men's group. That's actually every week we start with a sensei piece around that,
Right.
and go through these 4 phases of the work. Actually, I go through them with Andy Wick too in our podcast, of these 4 rounds of lover, warrior, magician, and king. And so we share, we process, we do all this work together. So this format has been really effective for me. We come together and we do this every week. And so this comes from Mankind Project, right? That format that I'm describing of these 4 rounds, the 4 archetypes.
Yeah, well, the archetypes are universal, and we draw a lot on Jungian origins for the actual archetypes that are brought in. But the rounds are pretty typical to what goes on in Mankind Project, and some groups modify their form that they're bringing them into. There's a whole spectrum. As groups, there are various circles that are formed. There are some circles that are formed that are open to anybody, anytime that they're ready. And other times there are closed groups that are guys who just want to be able to do their own processing in the company of others that they know. And, one is not necessarily better than the other, but we always try and find a door to be able to bring guys into the men's work when they're ready.
And doing the men's work with men at different levels. I mean, there's a lot we could talk about, I think, with men's work here and jump into. So I think that you were pointing out the essential skills, though, that you share, you've gotten in men's work. And I've gotten to do this work with you too, around listening, emotional intelligence. I've been grateful to lead the circle and get to bring my own topics into this too.
Yeah, and you brought some great ones.
Yeah, we've had some great conversations and great circles, and I've been fortunate to get to lead. It's been a privilege to lead the men in the circle. Also, one experience I haven't had yet is the Warrior Weekend training too.
Right.
And so talk a little bit about initiation too with men's work, and how that's your experience of that and some of these retreats, because that's something I haven't gotten to do yet and seems to be quite important in this culture.
Yeah. So the main thing that started Mankind Project was this sense that the initiations that used to happen for men in pre-industrial societies had gone away. And if anything, men went through experiences that weren't community building in their growth and such. So the recognition that historically it's been very important for men to be initiated into the tribe and to have the support of older men and younger men and others, and to know that they're not alone and such, that had gone away quite a bit. And in the mid 80s, there was a group of guys in Chicago area and up into Wisconsin that got together and started formulating this whole idea of doing a weekend initiation for men who hadn't experienced that kind of thing. And a lot of the guys that were part of this were Vietnam vets and others who came back who didn't have anything but a history of trauma around dealing with other men in a lot of ways, and needed to find tools to be able to deal with that. And so they developed this whole strategy, this whole weekend called a New Warrior Training Adventure. And that evolved and such, and has been a very active thing for a Mankind Project all the way up to a year ago or a year and a half ago when COVID hit. And there just haven't been any weekends since then. But there are New Warrior trainings that go on all over the world. And matter of fact, there are some going on internationally now, but not any in the United States at the moment. But the idea was to create that initiatory experience. And after a number of guys did that, the guys who were the leaders at the time said, well, all right, so what do we do with these guys now? Right? So they said, all right, so we're going to create this thing, this primary training that teaches them how to function together and create a group, an integration group was what it was called. So these integration groups were formed out of the initiates from the weekend, which was all great, except, you had to go through the weekend to be able to get it. And it wasn't necessarily on your schedule. It was only on the schedule for when the weekends come. So eventually there were integration groups that were created to allow any man to join in whenever he was needed, whether he had experienced the New Warrior training or not. And our group in San Luis Obispo was one of the first that was called an open circle, that any man could come to at any point that he needed to, even if he was uninitiated, or even especially if he was uninitiated, to be able to start his work. And we found that to be a really successful strategy of come into the work when you're ready, and at some point go through the initiatory experience, and then come back to the group and come back into community.
I actually have to admit, I didn't know that I group stood for integration group. I've been hearing I group so many times, and it's one of those like light bulb. Oh, it's integration group. I get it. And
right.
So I would like to understand a little too how you're seeing gold mining, which is what we're getting into now, how it's grown out of Mankind. You described the Mankind project intention and group structure with the Warrior Weekend and the integration group. You've come in and innovated on that structure, and I've gotten involved since you've innovated with this gold mining intention, this gold mining structure and approach that you've started to develop. Tell me a little bit about how that works with Mankind Project and how that evolved.
Sure. If you look at the history of Mankind Project and the work that they've done, most of the work over time has been focused on shadow work. In the classic definition, shadow being what's hidden, repressed, and denied. Shadow work can be a really effective way to create awareness and integrate parts of self that are denied. And it can be very consuming. And in my experience, and the experience of a lot of others like yourself, shadow work can only be done so long before you need to do something else. There is work around creating a life's mission that is brought in as part of the initiation weekend, as part of the New Warrior training. It just was always underemphasized. So what I came in and saw was that there needed to be more of a balance between the what I want in my life's mission and purpose, and what do I do when the shadows show up. And the whole idea with gold mining is that if you focus on your life's purpose and your gold and what you want, you're going to get more gold. And if you focus on shadow, you're going to get more shadow. So what's your choice?
And this is a big innovation. And I personally had been a little bit, had some blockages with men's work because I tried men's circles before and found that it was a lot of shadow work. It felt like important that there was a safe space to me for men to come and get to be safe to express trauma and pain. And, men have, in my experience and in my own personal life, I've hidden some of that pain or that in order to be strong, to live up to this stoic ideal sometimes we have and toxic masculinity, that it is revelatory, like what Mankind Project created and the coming together of men to share what's going on inside them, how they're feeling, and especially with trauma. We talk about veterans benefiting from this work. I want to honor that. That feels like an important innovation in its own right to bring men together again. It's innovation. It's something that men have been doing, I think, for thousands of years. But to bring men back together, to be able to safely share that was an innovation. But there was more needed. I feel like what you're coming in and we're coming in to do with gold mining is evolutionary, is the next step of that. That once we have a safe space to share what's going on inside of us, what do we ask for? What do we want in our lives? Where do we go from there? Because that itself can become a comfort zone or a safe space to, as you like to say, wound worship.
Wound worshiping, yes.
And when you say wound worshiping, it's a term that comes up. How would you define wound worshiping, or how do you notice it when you see it?
If you come and you work on the same emotional issue 10 times in a row with no resolution, that's wound worshiping, or especially if you do it for 10 years. And I've seen that happen. I've seen that kind of thing go on. The if you take a step back from it, you look at the basis that was formed in the work was around emotional intelligence and being able to understand emotions as the language of the soul. And that is a really important aspect. And there has to be the transcendent aspect of how do I take that into service in my life? And that's what the mission-oriented work, what the gold mining work is really about, is going from the emotional level where we can become stuck. I'm sure you, like I and others, have seen many people, and maybe even ourselves at times, where we get stuck in emotional loops, and that can be the wound worshiping. Well, to get beyond that, we have to step out beyond ourselves. And that's what the mission work is about and what gold mining is all intended to focus on.
Why do we get stuck in those? Why would you say we get stuck in those emotional loops?
Because sometimes they're very alluring. And sometimes the pattern is just so strong that it's hard to break. Especially something that's trauma induced in one form or another can be really hard to break free of, and takes a lot of conscious work to be able to get through. And sometimes it's necessary to do that in a private therapy kind of a setting. And sometimes it's a really good idea to be challenged around that in the work that we do within the men's group, just to be able to get beyond self.
And you said an important word to me, which was service. Is how do we turn this towards service? To how do we, we have this space now to work on emotional intelligence, to touch these traumas, to touch into these spaces. Mm-hmm. And I also want to add one innovation that I like about gold mining circles is we have an energy watcher too. Yes. So we show up accountable to each other to not get stuck in those circles. It's not there's personal responsibility but we support each other not to loop around and around and around. And the energy watcher, tell me about why we have an energy watcher and how that role emerged in the circle.
Well, specifically, the energy watcher is looking for things coming in sideways, that might be unconscious, either in the men participating or in whoever's leading, because that can all happen. So the energy watcher is looking for projections, and a lot of the work that we do in the men's work is about learning to own our projections, both the positive and negative things that we see outside ourselves and others that may not necessarily be owned. So I might see something in you that I think is just really amazing, and Jake, I could just never be like you because you're just so awesome in this way. That is a disowned projection. That happens to be a golden projection. Now, if you unconsciously remind me of someone that I grew up with who was just a real idiot, and I can't get past that, and I'm putting that on you, and effectively, putting you between me and this past relationship, that's a negative projection. That's a shadow projection. And those are the kind of things that we're watching for, and we're trying to clear the space of all the time, because that really has an effect on the container. So there are times where, as energy watcher, I or whoever's doing that job has to call attention to what's the projection that's going on here. What does this have to do with your mission? Or is this something that you're looping in that's old pain? And if so, how can you transcend that? How can you transmute the pain? And it's not a matter of shaming in doing that. It's more a matter of calling attention to, is there something going on that doesn't serve here?
Yeah, I think when the energy watcher role is done really skillfully, which I've seen, it's also another learning opportunity for men, is to get to have that role of being the energy watcher. And we do pass it around the circle. And it is, the art of it, I found, is not to stop the shadow from coming out or block it or anything like that. It's a little more of Aikido, I would say, right, with that, of redirecting it.
Very much so.
When it's done well. And it's something I've learned a lot from Kevin and other men, a lot from you in the circle, is how to facilitate people when they're going through emotional experiences or traumas coming up, how to not. I felt fear in some of those moments when I've been responsible for holding space, fear of interfering with someone else's process, of projecting myself on it. And the circle creates a safe space. I get to be energy watcher, and the circle's created a safe space for me to step in and ask a question or offer a mirror to somebody, or just name that the current energy in the group or the current conversation. We have one of our agreements is we'll say mercy if when do we say mercy again? How would you define that?
If there's a stuckness going
Yeah.
on. Yeah. If something has gone on for a while without any kind of progress, it's like, okay, so let's go ahead and set that off to the side and let that cook for a while and maybe bring it back or bring it back offline. Yeah. Because frankly, sometimes guys just want to be recognized, just want to be seen, and that's okay. And it can chew up a tremendous amount of time in the group. So we need to be really careful about, what's allowed to be brought in and consume the group's energy.
Yeah, I think it's important. And it feels like because of the way it's facilitated, because of the structure, it's a very structured group, but also we have these roles, we have these intentions. I feel like my time is being used well being in the group. I don't feel like I've had experiences in circles where it feels like we're spinning our wheels, where it feels like it's performative. I think sometimes when you have the same trauma coming out in the 10th time in the same way for the same guy, it starts to not feel like we're co-creating or evolving for me.
Well, and that's the point where other members in the group start to say, come on, what am I here for? And start to fade away. And I have seen that in the past. So that's been a real lesson to stop that early and bring it into consciousness. And if there's a way to be able to work through that, great, let's do that. And if it's something that really needs to be worked on outside the group, then take that direction.
I think that's been a big part of it for me, is that there is this opportunity to invite men to take it offline. We do a check-in of the charge, if we're feeling any charges. And there is this, we'll do thumbs up, if we have thumbs up if we're clear, thumbs sideways if we have a charge that we can process offline, or thumbs down if we want to do it in the group. And most often we can, if there's a one-on-one thing going on, we can resolve that one-on-one. If there's a charge, we can just noticing it is the practice for me a lot of times. And it doesn't need to chew up, so much time working through projections or working through things that we've built the tools, especially in the leadership group, we've built the tools to process other ways. Yeah. And we can save the circle time for the really beautiful collaborative processes, the co-facilitating, really in the present work, what's really alive for men right now, and not just going back to the same past experience.
The thing that I observe that's fun actually is that when charges come up, most often in the gold mining circle, they are positive charges.
So true.
And it's like, man, I am seeing this and this is so cool. And I really appreciate you bringing, and it's that bubbling forth of gold. And, there's been times though, where I have to ask guys in that, whether I'm in the leadership role or the energy watcher role, of saying, okay, so tell me about your ownership of that. I hear that you see that in him. Tell me about that in you. And usually there's an awkward silence that follows that, because that hasn't even been considered, because it's so easy to put it out there, right? But when it comes to actually owning, there's a part of me that really has that gold. That's something we don't really get trained in. That's what the gold mining circle's for.
That's great to recognize that too. I didn't really notice that that's a place too where we can hide, is in that gold charge, in that praise moment. That's like bringing that up for me, that it can be very comfortable to just be worshiping or celebrating or blessing others without finding that in ourselves, or the truth that it can be easier to give compliments than to receive them for many of us.
Exactly.
Sometimes for me.
Yeah.
So why is that? So I think that you're bringing that awareness to me. I'm grateful for that right now, is that I'm going to notice that in myself too, when I'm giving away all these compliments, giving away all these blessings, which is, by the way, something I love doing. We do a great job of in the circle, and we do it in our king round at the end. Yeah. So we share blessings.
And it really, the piece in that's most important is, and I recognize the piece of me that comes from.
Yes. and to receive it, to open ourselves to receive a blessing without deflecting it, to take compliments, to receive love, I think is part of the king round for me.
Yeah. The thing that, we talk about the projection aspect of it, the most difficult part of that, really, whether it's the golden projection or the shadow projection, whatever's going on in that regard, is the personal ownership piece of, if I see something in you, whether I like it or I dislike it, that same thing's in me. It's the 12-step program piece around, if you spot it, you got it. And if that's something that's showing up and coming into my awareness, especially if it's giving me a substantial charge, I own that somewhere. And that's why so many times when things are coming up in group, I have to sit with them for a minute and go, okay, so I'm feeling something around this, and what's my charge in this? What's my piece in this one that I can take ownership of and be able to come into the conversation, if I need to, from a place of compassion around that. And if I'm leading a process and I'm getting really charged about it, I may very well hand that off to let somebody else lead while I work through that.
I love that. I love the way you work with ownership and ego and so many other energies and the circle that way. And it's kind of inspiring me to ask too, because I notice we take turns leading in the mining circle, and the way leadership is distributed. You've done a great job because you're the organizer of gold mining, but you're not the leader of gold mining, right?
It's not going to be me every week.
It's not the energy. I've got to lead a lot. Many other men lead the circles and step up to do different kinds of organizing and leadership roles. So I'm curious to ask about your approach to leadership, how you think of it. It's something I know I've already learned a lot about from you. So I'd love to hear just some insights you've had around being what kind of leader you aspire to be.
Well, I believe very much in the shared leadership model, where if you're going to be able to go on and lead your own work someday and have a circle and do the things that are really important to you, you've got to practice that somewhere, right? And I'm going to deepen my relationship and my understanding of who you are by letting you step into that space of lead and stumble and make mistakes and have glory and, do things well and all of that, the whole mix. That's really important to experience that. And, that's been what we've done in this community, in San Luis Obispo community, ever since we started it. We do a shared and a rotating leadership model. And I feel it's important to do the same kind of thing with what we're doing in the gold mining work. And I might mention too that the gold mining work is it's the weekly circles that we're doing online. It's also something that we developed that's called the Gold Mining Adventure. That's it's been done as a weekend, and it's probably going to break into an installments kind of thing that is about deepening the work around mission for guys who maybe have never done that kind of work before, and to have really an initiatory kind of experience into developing life's mission. And it's been amazing. The last one we did was January of 2020, just before COVID. We had 44 guys that participated in that up in Northern California. It was outstanding. And in the gold mining adventure work, we don't just go into life's mission, we go into what I've called support missions. So we develop a mission around the areas of life where guys tend to go off the rails the most. So we develop a life's mission, but we also develop a money mission. And then we also develop a sexual/creative mission. And those energies are the kinds of things that seem to be most challenging to keep in alignment with life's mission. And so it's the idea is, let's get all of the parts of us rowing together. And then we brought that kind of work about bringing those submissions into the gold mining circles also in the bits and pieces. We don't have a whole 15 hours worth of time to develop it on an individual circle, but we're taking the bite-sized chunks of that.
I've really enjoyed those bites and taking those bites out of the gold mining adventure. And I'm looking forward to the full adventure coming back. Is that something that's in the near future? Or what are some of the plans for gold mining going forward?
Well, there's a couple different things that are happening in that regard now. working with the parent organization nationally to bring gold mining to what's called MKP USA, the parent organization, as circles that men can integrate into as new men into the work. They can make a commitment to, hey, I want to do gold mining work for a year and enter what's called a committed circle to do that. So that's in process. The taking of the gold mining adventure into segments, part of which can be done as online pre-work and part of which can be done in person. And again, we're trying to break that up into segments that can be done that way, since so many things are being done virtual now. And it's, it is just plainly difficult to gather a larger group of people together now. Okay, so we have to be creative with the formats that we use. Also had requests from men who do this work internationally to be able to bring, in particular, tests for the gold mining circle into the UK and Sweden. And there's been talk about guys from Bulgaria and South Africa and other places being able to bring this work there. So, and then, you have friends that wanted to get some work going like this in Costa Rica. And to me, it's one of those things, it really does, this whole idea of working on mission and life's purpose, it really transcends language, it transcends national barriers. It's very much a universal kind of thing that can be rallied around.
So people hearing this and want to learn more, because yes, I'm so excited to hear about it growing into a worldwide place for men to come together and heal, and like to take some of these techniques and approaches and make them more global is really fills me with joy hearing that that's happening in all these different places. And so people that want to learn more right now, is there a place for what would you recommend for men interested in this work?
Well, if there's somebody who's interested in participating in our particular circle, they can contact me. My email is kevin@abundanthealthslo.org. That's one way to do it directly, more along the lines of what you and I have done together. Mankind Project has its own website, of course, with a lot of resources available, both for doing things like mission-oriented work and for doing shadow work, if that's what somebody needs. And I want to talk about that more here in just a minute too, just to make sure that there's a balance in that. But mkp.org is a great resource for getting into those kinds of programs and for finding local groups to get involved with and so forth. And some areas of the country have more of the open circles available to get involved in than others. The good news is that COVID forced so many things to go on online that you can pretty much any night of the week find an opportunity to get into an online circle. And the approach that we use in the gold mining circle is that we're going to focus on what we want. We're going to focus on our life's mission and our gold. And the moment making that kind of commitment, the universe has this habit of putting up the resistance. Well, but what about this? And that's when the shadow stuff comes in. And so it's important to have the tools around, here's what I want, and then the tools around, how do I deal with the resistances and things that come up that get in the way of that? And that's the balance. That's the yin and yang that you want to have in approaching this kind of work. And it's not all one or the other. There was one of the guys that had accused me at one point of doing a spiritual bypass in doing the gold mining work. And I said, well, you're entitled to your opinion, and we look at what is it that I really want, and what do I do about the stuff that shows up that gets in the way. So to me, that's the best balance that I can have in going into this kind of work.
That's important insight of starting with what we want and then seeing what comes up, instead of starting with shadow. Let's start with gold. Let's start with mission.
Starting with, how am I wounded?
How am I wounded? Yeah, that's the opening question. We start so many of our rounds with our mission statement. And I share with Andy about how to create a mission statement if you're interested, and a process I've done with Kevin a few times too. And so to focus, to lead with that, to lead with our mission, seems to be a really important foundational approach of this, is mission first.
Yeah. So, and this is an interesting way to approach it. In the organization, there's a form that's offered for the way mission is taught. It's mission equals vision plus action. And, so my mission statement, I co-create a peaceful world of healing and wholeness by listening and practicing unconditional love and compassion, has both those vision and those action elements to it. And one of the things that we've gotten into gold mining is to start to play with that and say, well, what if that was a poem? Or in the conversations that we've had, what if that was a lyric that you could actually set to music and let that be the song of your soul? And that's where it gets really fun and really creative. When we start to break out beyond kind of the hyper masculine, forms that things have to look like, and start to get into the poetry of the soul. That's really cool stuff.
People who know me now probably aren't surprised. That's why I love this guy, is pushing against some of these forms and is innovating like this, that bringing play, bringing creativity and joy into mission statements. I think we've had a lot of fun together doing that. And I think it's what's kept this alive for me I haven't been doing it 17 years like you, but it's made it a part of my week because I get to show up and change my mission statement or even expand it poetically, or to come up with I have money missions and sexual missions that have also turned into poems for me. And so this invitation to be creative, and I see that as so essential to how we understand ourselves, is by accessing that creative intuition and imagination around our deep work. And so Kevin is like, I feel like you've been aligned with that, as much as I've known you, you've always been encouraging that kind of inspiration and that kind of play. So thank you for that.
Thanks. This next week, there's one of the guys in the group that's just been dealing with a lot of fear stuff that's coming up. And so the invitation that I made to him was, okay, so are you ready to lead the group around turning fear into an ally? And there was that awkward silence that followed that. And then, yeah, I'll do that. And so a lot of this is about, okay, so step into leading around what you need, what challenges you most. Bring that to the group, because you're not alone. And to me, that's one of the biggest beauties of what we do in the men's work, is that it reminds me that I'm not alone. There's so much in our culture that makes us as men feel like we're out there on our own, and we're the only one who feels this way, and we're the only one who has this experience, and we're the only one with these wounds, and the only one with these problems. And it's all just absolute bullshit. And, so to be able to enter into a space where it's like, oh, I'm not alone, and I can actually use the intelligence and the creativity of the group to be able to come up with really great ways to work with the stuff that's shown up in my life. Now that's a gift. That's an absolute, and that is a primary reason for doing the work.
Wow. Yeah, I feel that. I feel completely aligned with that. And I feel a little opening in my heart just hearing you say those words, because I've felt that. I've witnessed men have that realization. I've had it myself in circle. Oh, other men feel like this too. Oh, the shame I feel is not just my shame. This came from outside me.
I thought I was alone.
I'm not different. And it's not that I'm not different. We also celebrate, I think, the uniqueness of people and their unique worlds. But so much of our pain is shared. So much of our challenges and so much of the joy can also be shared too. So I think I kind of count on all of that each week when I show up for the circle. And so I'm super grateful for this space that you've been tending and co-creating with me and other men for these years. And